It's early on a cold, foggy morning, the kind of weather my friend Tshering Tashi is well used to. And it's a pleasure to be with him and with Wipas Srithong. As you can see from his beautiful go that our friend is a Bhutanese. And I've had the pleasure of working with him on the Bhutan Literature Festival. And I'm delighted that he's here in Jaipur for the first time to share the incredible experience of these magical 5 days, even if a bit crowded. So actually, we should all feel very happy that there's space to breathe in this room, and it's not yet got to the level where it's unbearable sometimes, really. Now, Wipas is from Thailand. It's also his first time here. He's a writer. He's also a poet. He will talk about his work and introduce it, and introduce the context in which he's writing, and also do some readings, as will Tshering. And I leave them to now get on with it. We begin with Tshering Tashi giving us some background about the various kinds of writing he has done on Bhutan. Thank you, Wipas, for being here with us, and I hope you feel better soon. You have to remember, you have to give him an extra clap for everything he says, because he's not feeling very well today. Let's have a clap for them already.
Thank you, Namita. I will start my session with a riddle. And the riddle is three-part. And the first part of the riddle is where the sun rises, where power is money, and the last part of the riddle is with billions in the horizon. And I would like the audience to try and unlock the mystery of this puzzle. Yes, except for Namita, I think we open the floor to everybody. The riddle has three parts, and the first part of the riddle where the sun rises. Anybody like to take a pot shot? Exactly. Yes, S-O-N. Yes, Bhutan. And why? Exactly. And the second part? Close enough. Exactly. Yeah. Okay, for the benefit of those here in the hall, in 2008, the fourth king abdicated his throne in favor of his son, who is currently the king, and fifth in his succession. We have over 2,000 glacial lakes that feed our pristine rivers that generate hydroelectricity for us, which we export to India. And today, it is the revenue generated from the export of electricity to India is the biggest source of revenue for the state exchequer. The last part of the riddle, from Bhutan, if you look north, we have China, 1.4 billion people, the most populated nation. If you drive from Bhutan for 6 hours, you will reach India, the plains of India, with 1.2 billion. So we are sandwiched between the two most populated nations on the planet. Good morning. Welcome to today's session, Untold Stories and Unclimbed Mountains. I've divided my session into two parts. The first part is about the mountains, and I will start the first part. The summit you see here in this photograph is that of Mount Chomalhari. It's 24,000 feet. It sits on the border between Tibet and Bhutan. For the Bhutanese, this mountain is one of the most sacred mountains. One, we believe that the mountain is the abode, the house of the protecting deity called Jongmo. And the second, because the mountain is so symmetrical, has been termed fit to be the throne of the god. It is also believed that Mount Chomalhari is the bride of Mount Kanchenjunga, which is the third highest mountain in the world. This photograph was taken in 1970 on 23rd April at 4:30 a.m. The two mountaineers, both Indians, they planted the flags of India and Bhutan. So the story behind this mountain climbing. Good morning. In 1937, there's an English mountaineer called Spencer Chapman, who claims to have scaled the mountain. But today it's still a controversy. 3 decades later, in 1970, a colonel from the Indian Army, Colonel Kumar, proposed to our king, and the king agreed, and there was an Indo-Bhutan expedition to scale the mountain. 10 people were chosen, and on April 23rd, 4:30 a.m., around 3 o'clock, the first expedition, consisting of 5 mountaineers, out of which one was a Bhutanese, they started scaling the mountain. After 1 hour of climbing razor-sharp slopes and slippery slopes, 100 feet short of Mount Chomalhari, they stopped to regain their breath. Now, as mountaineers will tell you, climbing mountains in the Himalaya is a draw of the luck. The weather is unpredictable. There are a lot of things, obstacles, and perfect, just 100 feet. Suddenly, the Bhutanese man told his Indian counterparts, he said, I cannot allow you to go any further. If you do, all of us are going to perish. And the Indian 4 mountaineers looked at him and said, we've trained for so long, why would you stop when we are so close to scaling it? And we are soldiers, we have instructions to plant the 2 flags. The Bhutanese said, no, it is sacrilegious, and I do not want to commit something that my people will not approve of. So he's left behind. The 4 Indian soldiers scale it, spend an hour, they plant 2 flags, one of Bhutan, the other of India, and they also place, if you look on the right side of the screen, on the floor you will find there's an urn, there's a pot, and in it contains precious minerals and materials blessed by the monks in the capital. And the reason being, it is to pacify the goddess. So they plant it. On the way down, they pick up the Bhutanese man. They meet 150 feet short of the summit. On the way down, the first expedition meets the second, consisting of 5 Indian soldiers. The climbing of Mount Chomalhari is known for 2 things. First, effective use of bamboos as scaffolding, and the second, the dramatic disappearance of the 5 mountaineers. To this day, we don't know what happened. Colonel Kumar, who was head of the expedition, he launched a 7-day rescue mission. They looked for these 5 mountaineers and couldn't find. And the Bhutanese mountaineer, he's a lieutenant in the army, his name is Chachu, he explained to his other fellow, a Tibetan who was a Buddhist, he said, you must not participate in the rescue because we have upset the goddess. So this is courting the divine bride, which now we go to the second. Did you know that Bhutan has the world's highest unclimbed mountain? Kankar Pinsum. Kankar means, Kang means, in Dzongkha it means mountain. Pin means 3 siblings. So we share the 2 peaks with China. No, the 2 peaks are in China, and the tallest peak we share with China. So far there have been 3 expeditions, and none of them were successful. In 1987, the 65th session of the National Assembly, which was the highest legislative body in the country, imposed a ban of mountaineering in Bhutan. The trigger was in 1986, a mountaineer, English mountaineer, Steve Berry. He planned an expedition. So he came, the government wanted 40,000 pounds, which he produced. They tried to scale. And as I mentioned earlier, the weather conditions are extremely unpredictable. So they reached, the mountain is 7,570 meters. And when they reached 22,000 feet at advanced base camp, the day of summiting, the weather turned. And mountaineers will tell you that climbing in the eastern Himalayas is more difficult than climbing Mount Everest for two reasons. Number one, the winds are more severe because we are on the eastern side of the Himalayas. And number two, the mentality of the porters. In Bhutan, we don't have Sherpas. And these people, mountain people, are very independent and they will do what they want. And mountaineers have very difficult time controlling them. For these two reasons, climbing mountains in Bhutan is an ordeal. So they tried to scale, unsuccessful. They came back. The people living in the high country, they protested. They told the government, why are you letting foreigners step foot on a mountain and committing a sacrilegious act? Since then, the government has listened and there is a total ban on mountaineering in Bhutan. We have standing offer in 1990, for example, in 1998, a Japanese expedition, they wanted to scale the mountain from the Tibetan side. The Chinese had given permission. They also had given the fees of 40,000 pounds. But a well-wisher from Japan informed our government, and our government through diplomatic channels took it up with the Japanese and reminded them of the ban of mountaineering. The Chinese withdrew, refunded the Japanese, and reminded the Japanese that Bhutan has imposed a total ban on mountaineering. Since then, no such requests have come either from Bhutan or the Chinese side. And to this day, we have offers. For example, in 2006, the Japan Alpine Club, a very exclusive mountaineering club in Japan, they offered $1 million to scale Mount Kankurpinsum. And to this day, the government has not given permission for them to scale. As a result, and being one of the only countries in the world with a total ban on mountaineering, today we have over 20 peaks, over 7,000 meters that have not been scaled. So this is one of the photograph of one of these expeditions. This is also Mount Kankurpinsum. It's the source of Chamkarchu, one of the rivers in central Bhutan. Maybe you want to take over now and then come back.
Okay.
Yeah, I think. No, I have a second part, but before I start, I think we should request Wipas.
Oh, really? I thought you, okay. Anyway, can you hear me? Right. So there's a Bangkok is flatland. I'm from Bangkok, Thailand. So we don't have any mountains. Okay. So the mountains in Thailand, for me, in this subject is more what is called metaphorical thing. It's Unclimbed mountain for me is the mountain of to get full democracy. You know what happened in Thailand is coup and become a military state, and we still have a martial law. So the mountain that we want to reach, that apex, is the apex of freedom, a real freedom of speech, a fresh air of freedom, and equality. Okay, so I'm going to talk more about my work and under this context of what happened in Thailand. So I want to maybe reading my new novel that going to be published in March. The novel is called anyway. It's in Thai, so it's a bit difficult because the bird up there and try to recount its shadow on the ground. So because it's kind of like hard to tell your novel by, especially in different language. Anyway, so the novel called The Vanishing. I can just put the synopsis. The synopsis is, last year Thailand has a military coup, which is actually it's about 12 times already in about 60 or 70 years. And we still have martial law. We still have the same of the world's harshest of Le Majesty law, which is, if you say bad thing about the royal family, you get 3 or 5 years in jail and with no bailout. If you said 5, so you do the math. If you said 5 sentence, you get 15 years or 25 years. Okay, my latest novel vanishing express the human psyche against this political background. It's look at the concept of erasure and disorientation and how atrocity and freedom of thoughts are silenced by this regime. Okay, I'm going to read this section, this chapter. This novel is about a concept of getting lost. Getting lost. This group of people are kind of like have some. There's one guy, the main from a website that he experienced of being lost. I mean, consciously lost. So, and then put the experience in the website and reporting getting lost in it. So how this getting lost is so fascinating, which is actually is quite frustrating and anxious, state of mind. But I try to write on this subject because nowadays everybody have this, everybody have GPS, everybody know where they are. You will take it for granted that longitude, latitude. You overconfident that you know everywhere you are, and like your city, are you sure that you really see the real face of your city that you live every day? So this group of people, they let themselves consciously lost, and when they get to that stage of frustration, but they're not panic. They just wait until to the point that they start to feel fine with it, being lost, and get some sense of blissfulness or ecstasy of getting lost. And it's kind of like they have the heightened of sense of touch the surrounding, feeling more of a heightened sense of the thing that they take it for granted, but they're not. Now they see more. They see things that they won't see. So I'm going to read this part when with the main character in this novel, he's an ex-medical student. Anyway, like we are in a modern world. We are in a state of like we cannot. We have an inability to detach from a connection. Like getting lost is in that sense, the sense of that you don't have to connect to anything anymore. You are totally alone. You're totally on your own with your consciousness. And so I think this is what I try to portray is in a modern world of and in the backdrop of in the background of Thailand situation, which is have some background dealing with the loss. Is a lot of Thai victims that being killed and being murdered by soldiers. In Thailand, we have a long history of dissidents got killed, and have disappeared. So in this novel, this thing being lost is have some kind of the metaphor about these two. Anyway, okay, I'm going to read this part when with the main character, he consciously going to be feeling lost by he going to the super busy mall in Bangkok, some kind of Bangkok busy mall, but instead of lost, he just throw his consciousness and throw sense of his direction, and just follow people in the mall and eavesdrop people's conversation. So I'm going to read this part. Okay, bear with me a bit. So now he's in the mall. Witt walked absently and stood by a Greek-style column on the third floor of an oval atrium, looking down vaguely over the crowd. Isn't it? A slow voice touched his ear. Yes, normal people won't play this game. We are all lost already. The sound came from two purple uniform office women walking past him. Whit felt interested in their conversation and followed the two down to the second floor and into a discount baby clothes shop. He touched the merchandise in the shop, pants, jumpsuits, socks, caressing the soft fabric and looking around, forgetting the two women. A saleswoman watched him and was about to approach, but Witt avoided her and turned to the front of the shop, seeing an oval-faced middle-aged woman drop something as she walked past. He rushed out to pick up a crushball paper, intending to return it to its owner. He suddenly realized that she has probably intended to throw it anyway. But then, still wanting to follow her, he pushed through a big group of teenagers gathered in front of the IT shops. Better do something else, believe me, a voice came from the group. No, it's not true. Yes, it's true. Trying to disappear is just an attention-seeking. With halt, turning to look who had said it, but couldn't tell. He moved along, thinking that perhaps it was an hallucination. There was some laughter while he pressed himself through the group. Suddenly, he was surrounded by laughter, joined by others as if they were making fun of him. Witt hurried to follow the middle-aged woman to the escalator and down to the basement level, entering a huge supermarket with oceans of merchandise on the shelves. He felt as if he was slipping into another world with its own atmosphere, separate from the outside. He shadowed her, picking up the same items she had put in her trolley, reading the label and caressing them before returning them to the shelf. He inched closer, sometimes almost touching her, but avoiding meeting her eyes. He heard her mumbling, whilst reading the labels. Her voice seemed soft and pleasant to hear. After a while, he stopped following. He walked through the narrow homeware aisle, coming out into the bathroom fixtures section, and walked along this wider space. Watching people queuing with trolleys at the checkout, his gaze stopped at the iris of the CCTV camera above the cashier. He looked hard at the black hole at the lens gazing back at him. It's good to open your eyes, but don't try to see anything. The voice came from a man talking on a mobile walking past him. Isn't that right? Don't you think? You see what happened next. We didn't hear the rest of the sentence. He turned and looked at the back of the man carrying a briefcase until he disappeared around the corner and softly repeated the words that he had heard. It's good to open your eyes, but don't try to see anything. Witt went up to the 5th floor, where there was a huge food court. He ordered a meal and chose to sit by a fish tank, slowly showing his rice, swallow without tasting. Witt gulped water from his bottle, pushed the rice aside and walked up to the coupon refund booth. Do you know? A man in front of him was talking to a small boy standing beside. I don't know. Please know. Know what? The boy asked. That blind people always use two hands to shake hands. More, uncle. An elephant cannot jump. Tell me more. All polar bears are left-handed. How do you know that, uncle? The boy giggled. Do you want to hear more? Of course. A rooster cannot walk backwards. I know that. Okay. Then why do we have Friday? Witt refunded his coupon and left without hearing the answer. He squinted and looked at the mass of people. He decided to choose gray. He walked and joined them, looking for someone wearing gray. He found his target and moved to a man wearing gray suit and carrying an expensive briefcase. His hair peppered with gray, carefully combed and shiny. The man in suit walked energetically, glancing at his own reflection in the shop windows. It was clear that he was content with his looks and movement. With zigzag, keeping the distance between them, the man walked rigorously without pausing. He turned into a narrow corridor. At first, we thought that he was going to the toilet, but he went straight to the lift and pushed the up button, stepping backward and smoothing back his hair. Studying his reflection in the lift doors, which stood behind him. The lift arrived, the door opened. The man waited until the passengers exit before stepping in. A woman in a department store uniform joined him. The gray suit man looked at Whit questioningly. Whit didn't move and returned the gaze with blank expression, standing still until the doors closed before leaving. Whit wanted to leave the mall. He decided to follow someone else and chose Brew. After following a bleached, blonde, stylish young man for a while, until he went to the escalator, he stopped and changed to follow a blue uniform guard, swaggering forward and leading him out of the mall as he wanted. Outside, the sun was sinking, and the twilight of a hot night had arrived. The guard went straight to the guardhouse by the entrance to the car park. We stood by the traffic lights nearby. A chance to build a boon for your life. The chanting radio came from window of the guardhouse. If you have no charisma and don't come, you will lose your chance. The sound faded and then came back clearly. Karma is the circle of life. We build this as the vicissitude of life. We crossed to the other side of the road and walked along the footpath, past the intersection, walking straight without purpose. He crossed 3 streets, nothing inspiring him to turn. He walked, stooped, hardly noticed his path or surroundings, only knowing that the sky had no light. When he looked up, he saw the moon. He remembered that when he left the mall, it was on his left, but now it was on his right and about to be covered by thick clouds. He wandered for a long time, not knowing where he was. He crossed to the other side, where there was a dim karaoke bar and a restaurant. The street seemed emptier. Over half the shop houses, the offices closed. He moved along, entering many small side streets and dark alleys, and then turned back, going into another street without a plan. He passed the closed fresh market. In front was a small entrance into the market. While he stepped through stacks of discarded boxes, he heard a woman's voice coming from inside. "Wait at the car." "What did you say?" The sound came from the other side of the street, which was equally dark. The sound had a low, anxious tone. We turned and strained to see, glimpsing the dark silhouette of a man. I said, "Wait at the car." "Shout again." "Wait at the car." "I can't hear you." "Shout louder." The back and forth shouting between the two sides made Whit stop as though hypnotized. He stood with hands in pockets in the dim light, looking left to right, following the reverberating sound. "What did you say?" "Wait at the car or leave right now." "Hey, what did you say?" Whit called a taxi home. Just before the rain poured down, he politely asked the driver to turn down the radio. He felt tired, his throat dry. He leaned back in his seat and stretched his legs, closing his eyes. Having wandered all afternoon, replaying what had happened, he felt overwhelmed. The rain subsided. He looked through the window, which reflected the light. He saw raindrops on the window moving and vibrating like amoeba under a microscope. sliding across the pane. At home, he had a shower and then went straight to his bedroom. He saw a light from under his mother's door, but didn't want to disturb her, knowing that she always went to bed early. That night, while lying in bed, he suddenly remembered something and reached for his pants hanging across the chair. He pulled a crushed ball of paper from his pocket and flattening it. Staring at a completely blank piece of wrinkled paper, he stared at the creases and wrinkled lines in wonder before squeezing it back up into a ball. Thank you. This part. So you turn.
Wipas said roosters can't walk backwards. We also know humans can't levitate, but here's proof that says otherwise. So this is one reason why we have to leave our mountains unclimbed, so that adepts, monks like can go and practice their meditation. Okay. Welcome to Wipas and my session called Unclimbed Mountains and Untold Stories, and I'm now moving to my second part of my session, which is called Untold Stories. In this session, I will be talking about two short stories. One, the Yeti, the other is on trance runners. Now this is a mural from one of our old fortresses in Bhutan. It's how Bhutanese describe the Yeti. And Yeti, the search for the Yeti is nothing new. You know, in 326 BC, when Alexander the Great surged through the Khyber Pass and conquered the Indus Valley civilization, he demanded for a Yeti, and the only reason why they could not produce one was because the Yeti lives in high altitudes. The Yeti has different names. For example, in Australia, it's called Yowie. It's also known as the Bigfoot, the abominable snowman, and in Bhutan, they're called Meges. We Bhutanese, we pray that we do not cross paths with the Yetis, because if we do, we will not be able to live to tell its tale. And do you know what to do if you confront a Yeti? Anybody? Would you like to guess what Bhutanese would do if we encounter a Yeti? Yes, run, sensible. First thing we will, but before we run, we'll determine the gender. If it is a female Yeti, we will run downhill, because it is believed the female Yeti has sagging breast, and when she runs downhill, she has to keep putting it up, and that slows her pace. On the other hand, if it is a male Yeti, we believe it has long hairs, and when they ascend, they get caught in the hair and it slows down their pace. This is something, if you visit Bhutan, you must keep in mind, because we don't know whether you will come across a Yeti. Now, Bhutan is unique in the sense that we are the only countries in the world that has established a sanctuary, a park dedicated to the Yeti. It is 650 square kilometers, and it's in the northeast, and people are still looking for the Yeti. Now, so far, there have been two expeditions to look for the Yeti. The first one was in 1987 by an Australian mountaineer called Reinald Messner. Now, Reinald Messner, his name to fame is he climbed Mount Everest the first man to climb Mount Everest without oxygen. And number two, when he reached Mount Everest, he brewed a Bhutanese tea. We drink salt, butter, it's called butter tea, and he brewed it so that he could replenish his energy. So he came with the expedition, and there was a young cameraman, a German cameraman with him. His name is Paul. So they traveled the country, and they were supposed to go to the northeast of Bhutan. On the way, they stopped in a valley called Phobjikha, a beautiful valley. And in that valley, there's a very ancient fortress. And inside the fortress, there's an inner sanctum. Normally, women are not allowed, and non-Bhutanese not allowed. But the monk there, he was a kind monk, and he made an exception. So Reinald Messner and Paul, the young German cameraman, entered the inner sanctum on the condition that they do not take photographs. Now, in that inner sanctum, there is a carcass, a mummy, and people believed it to be the Yeti. So they come, Paul gets very excited. Suddenly, in the dark room, there is no electricity. the monk sees a flash. And the monk looks at these two foreigners and tells them, look, we had a deal. Please keep your word and don't breach our word. 5 minutes later, Paul is too excited. Now he thinks he has evidence of the Yeti, and he, on his return, that he will produce it. So he gets excited. He takes another photograph. This is when the monk shows Paul and Reinhold Messner out of the door. So they camp the night. But interestingly, that night, young German, athletic, he's an adventure photographer. He breaks into a fever. He has dysentery. They have to call for a helicopter. He flies, clutching his camera, thinking now he's the only one in possession of evidence of the Yeti. Reinhold Messner calls off the expedition, and this is the last we heard of. Few years later, in 2001, Reinhold, another Englishman, his name is Harry Marshall, and he saw the German man's expedition to Bhutan unfinished. So he said, let me finish it for them. So he starts an expedition, and this time he comes fully equipped. He has money, he's got scientists, he's got a primatologist. They said, what if the Yeti is an ape? They have herpetologists. You name it, they have all the scientists in the world with them. They come to Bhutan, spend 3 weeks in the forest in northeast, looking for evidence of the Yeti. Finally, after 3 weeks of hunting, they find a hair in the cedar tree, which they take back. They make a movie. Harry Marshall makes a movie, a documentary, and the world's renowned DNA scientist, Professor Brian Skies from Oxford University, does DNA sequencing, and he declares that they cannot match it to any known species. The Western world gets very excited. They tell Harry Marshall, now we need evidence, go back. And he said, what does it require for you to find the Yeti? And the answer is obvious, money. Because we have a very stringent tourism policy. For every tourist that comes to Bhutan, they have to pay $250 a night. So Harry Marshall obviously needed a lot of money because he needed to spend more time. So he managed to get resources. So he wrote back to the government of Bhutan saying, requesting for permission, and the government decided not to give him, saying that if there is anybody who will find the Yeti, it will be a Bhutanese. So I'm in touch with Harry Marshall, and last year he wrote back saying that Professor Brian Skies has now matched it to a known species, but it is a bear, an unidentified bear. Yeah, okay. So this unidentified bear is the blue bear. Now immediately when you say blue bear, people think it is huge. It isn't. No, it is not. It is neither blue in color, except for a tinge of blue in the collar. And the Western knowledge of blue bear is only through scat, through pelts of fur and bones. This mounted specimen is in the British Museum in London. So this blue bear is a cross between the brown bear and the polar bear, and extinct. In 1930, it was seen in the Tibetan plateaus. The natural home of the blue bear is Tibet at a high altitude. But we believe maybe they have come down to Bhutan and it is where it is. So currently we are all still looking for the Yeti, and I think is an untold story that I would like to have the pleasure of sharing with you. Now this brings me to the next untold stories, trance runners. Have you heard about trance runners? Anybody in the hall? Yeah. You've heard about trance runners. Very interesting. The first person outside Bhutan that I've come across who've heard about trance runners. Anyway, Tantric Buddhists. Bhutan is the cradle of Vajrayana Buddhism, and Tantric Buddhists believe that some monks have the ability and skill to ride the wind and travel long distances. Yeah, he finished. Relatively long distances in short time. In Bhutan, they're also known as Lungompas, people who are capable of riding the wind. And also in Tibet, they're called Kang Jopar. Kang means fast walkers. And in Japan, they're known as Sechinin Kaihoi. And these are monks that undergo a 1,000-day retreat. And one of the tests is that they walk 8,400 kilometers in 100 days, which means, imagine walking 84 kilometers a day for 100 days. And if you are capable of going through the 100-day retreat and completing this mission of walking 8,400 kilometers, then you are given this title. Now, nothing much is written about it. So I did a small research, found that there are only 3 trans runners left in Bhutan. Spoke to 2, all 3 of them are above 70. One is reached 90 years old. And 2 of them, adepts, highly realized masters, they say they don't agree that they don't confess that they are trans runners, but they all pointed to me to one person. And he is the trans runner. He is now 90 years old. His name is Lam Bosokap. In 1995, I had the pleasure of walking with him to a monastery up in the mountains in Thimphu. I'm an athlete, play basketball and soccer, and I could not keep up with this fellow. So he is wearing cheap rubber shoes. He had no problem climbing. So I started doing research on him and found that he walks really fast. And he was telling his nephew that the monks these days don't know how to walk. I met him twice, but both the times he refused to talk about the subject. So we believe that he could be the last trans runners left in the world. Now, if you move to Tibet, the only known school of trans running in the world is in Tibet. Henrik Harrier, Austrian mountaineer, and there's a movie based on him, a Hollywood movie called 7 Years in Tibet, where Henry Harrier is played by Brad Pitt. So he wrote a book, Beyond 7 Years in Tibet. And in that book, he talks about this trans running school. It is a monastery called Shula Gempa between Shikhatsi and Gyansi. And every year, this exclusive school, they're isolated. These monks train 2 things. Physically, they run on grains to build their leg muscles. And mentally, they have strict teachers who teach them meditation. And every year, they run not for 8,400 kilometers, 100 kilometers in one day without eating, resting, and drinking. And the winner, they choose one monk from this monastery. He runs to Lhasa, to Potala, and on completing this mission, he is made a member of the Tibetan nobility and is also given the title of yogi, someone who can suspend the state of mind. So, trans runners, historic Buddhism. Henrik Harrier says, if these monks were put in the Olympics, you will know who the winner is. But the reason why the monks guard it, and it is a secret practice, is because they don't want something like this to happen. Now I am done with the second story, and if Wipas would like to say something before we open the floor for Q&A.
So it seems the subject is kind of incongruous, is it? Anyway, I'm just maybe I can tell about Thai literature a bit. So I can talk about literature in Thailand since I feel, I can just put it this way. I feel deeply worried about the situation and the cultural oppression, and not just political oppression, and I feel deeply sad about what happened to. I was born and grew up in an era of Thailand thriving of democracy and prospering in critical thinking. We come up with a lot of promising, good, great artists. The films in the field of film, Thai won the Palme d'Or, best film in Cannes film, and this is emerging of a new generation of artists and writers. And then suddenly this thing stopped and halt and being eradicated out of Thailand. And this is a huge backward that I'm concerned to my next generation, a new young writer that's gonna come after me. So, I feel kind of injured and wounded. So it seems that the next generation of my writing and my friend, my colleague, co-writers is we call, I think I claim this is called post-wound literature from this. So this is what I can, that we can try to, instead of, in the end, we're gonna, I know with everybody gonna be, in the end, writer gonna be conform to this authoritarian state. That's very dangerous, the danger of conformity, you know, and this dying of critical thinking and this dying rate of freedom in my own country. So what I can do now is write and try as much as I can to protect, you know, to protect this. We are writers like me now become an endangered species in that country, in my country. So what I'm going to do is try as hard as I can to protect this. So that's all I can say.
We've got some time for questions, so if you have some questions, there.
Uphill task, huh?
What?
Uphill task for you.
What?
Difficult.
Yeah.
That's what I think. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Khun Wipas, Swadikap.
Swadikap.
I have lived in Thailand long time, past 2 years, and I'm very fascinated about your country and culture. I promote tourism there, and I think your country history is equally as good as India. And I think Thai tourism can do something to develop the old history of Thailand, and writers can be inspired by the history of Thailand, Ayutthaya and all, which is like deep, amazing stories. If a world can know them, that would be great. What do you think about that?
I'm sorry, he said.
Thai Buddhism can do something.
Thai tourism, Thai tourism.
Tourism.
Yes.
Actually, maybe they heard what I'm saying, but for me now, you go there, you supporting, you know, the money go to the tax go to this regime, the tax money going to this regime, to this government that suppress people. I'm really not really pro to let to any tourists to come to Thailand as long as it's not democracy country. You know, like Burma, you shouldn't go to Burma at that time when they have a suppressive regime, because you help the government, you help this money going to those aristocrats and those military that suppress us. This is helping if you're not going there, kind of like sanction in that way. You know. I think it's it will help us, you know, in the long term.
Kapun Kap. Good answer.
So, good morning. This question goes to Tshering. Actually, you spoke about trans-running monks and how it's a tradition that is closely guarded, it's a secret tradition. So I just wanted to know about where the future lies, whether you have enough people from the subsequent generations taking this art up, and also as to why it's such a closely guarded secret.
Okay. Thank you for asking the question. Bhutan is the last Mahayana kingdom, and we have a thriving culture and also Buddhism flourishing. Now, when I met the adept, he told me, if you can prove your intention, I can teach you to trance walk. But the problem is, I have not been able to. And on the other side, there are monks. So we have a Buddhist college. Every year, 300 graduates from it. And after they graduate, after studying for 9 years, they enter into a 3-year, 3-month, 3-day retreat. And one of the things they do is, levitation. It is a part. A novice monk, by the age of 21, he will be able to levitate. And when you say levitate, people immediately think he will just go up, but it isn't. The photograph I showed you earlier of that white clad, of this monk in wearing white cloth, he's actually levitating. And the word we use is baptikor, and simply means fooling your body. And it is a feat, because you're jumping stationary, and a novice monk, 21 years old, by the time he completes his 3-year, 3-month, 3-day retreat, he's done it. Similarly, now there are 6 chapters of this highly advanced yoga which they have to pass. And the other test is called psychic heating. So a monk, he will choose a cold winter day. And I tell you, in Bhutan, certain parts of Bhutan, when you say cold, the Jaipur cold is nothing. It's bone-chilling cold. Up in the mountains, ice, snow, at 3 a.m. in the morning, to make sure that there is the sunlight is nowhere. Before the sun rises, well after the sun has set, they will meditate, wearing a petticoat. They will dip their cloth in cold water and put it on the body and dry it, not once, not twice, but at least 3 times before they graduate. So, historic Buddhism, but if you prove your probation, there are schools. You and I also can be a part of it. Thank you for asking the question.
Good morning. You said that the Bhutanese government isn't allowing any English expeditions to happen because it wanted the first person to find the Yeti to be a Bhutanese. So, is there any plans of a Bhutanese expedition to find the Yeti? I want to know that.
Yeah, there is one. We've established a park, 696 square kilometers. I've walked to that park, remote, 4-5 days walking distance, and I also met some of these people, local people who have been engaged to look for the Yeti. And for the first time, we've organized a group of people. We are training them in use of camera traps, and maybe one day, and for once and for all, we will either establish the existence of the Yeti or dismiss it as a myth. Thank you for asking the question.
Hello, right here. The question is for the both of you. The commonality between Bhutan and Thailand is that both countries have an enlightened monarchy, but both are revered. And I was just wondering, what are the boundaries that can be pushed in terms of writing about the monarchy, about the government? What are the limits that you can achieve? Because I know that in Thailand, it's even a crime to criticize the king. And maybe both of you can answer the question. Thank you.
It's have a very strict law that in Thailand it's called the majesty law that you cannot criticize or say anything except a good thing to the monarchy. So you see, only one tone. You cannot criticize anything. And I'm very scared on this because if I say anything, I'm going back to my country, I get right away a Nobel. And the problem also is that they use this majesty law in the way that in a political reason, because anybody can sue anybody. Like when like if I talk to my friend and I say something bad about monarchy, my friend can just go to the police and say, maybe like record in a tape record. And even though he's not the monarchy himself, but he can use this to persecute me. To sue me. You see, and this law is open to this military state to suppress everybody. Now to the point that anybody who dissident, even though they are loyalists, but they are dissident to the coup, they disagree about this military dictatorship. The military will use this law that to against military coup means to, you know what I mean? I couldn't say that. So, this law in Thailand is a purely instrument to suppress people.
In 1998, the Danish sent a delegation to Bhutan. And the mission was to see if Bhutan was worthy of their developmental aid. So in the group of delegation, there was one man. He stood out. The way he dressed, the way he taught. Now his name is Frank On, and he's still a member of parliament in the Danish government, and he is anti-monarchy. So he was in the capital. He goes for an audience with the king. All the member, except him, all were well suited. He wore jeans and t-shirt, and his way of telling the king that he doesn't like the idea of monarchy. After an hour's meeting, the meeting ends. The king, the fourth king, taps Frank on the shoulder and he tells Frank, just like you, I don't like monarchy. Why don't we sit and discuss? They had a discussion. The king convinced Frank On. And remember, Frank On is a communist. As a student, he was the leader of the Congress youth. Today also he is leftist. And one of his aims in life is to bring down Danish monarchy. And his philosophy is simple. He said, monarchy is quaint. You know, they're old-fashioned. How can somebody's word be the law? The fourth king told exactly on the same thing. He said, the king is born and doesn't become one by merit. He said, how can somebody's word, how can my word be the law? He said, we are a developing country. I want to introduce democracy, but in due course of time. It has to be gradual. Everything has to be put in place. And the king told Frank on his face, he said, monarchy is good as long as you have a good king. But the question is, what if you have a bad king? The only exit is revolution, whereas in democracy you can cast your vote. So you talked about writing about monarchy. In Bhutan, our king is revered like a god. Unlike kings in Nepal and elsewhere, the kings are not descendants of God. They are ordinary people like us, but did things beyond human capability, and to this day they are revered as God. Okay, one question.
One last question if anybody has.
Please join me in thanking our introducer, Namata Gokali, and our speakers, Wipas, Srithong, and Tshering Tashi. Have a couple of announcements. First of all, the festival will end with a debate this evening in Rajniganda Front